Welcome home. In this podcast, we venture into what it means to be a leader in this new world. Human, flawed but working on things, and forever changed by using our intuition to guide us. I'm Adelina East, founder of Transformational Healing and mentor to those running soul-based businesses. Join me to receive transformational healing, tips to dive more deeply into your unique spiritual gifts, and to hear great conversations with other entrepreneurs in spirit. Let's get started. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Cosmic Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Adelina East. I am an EMDR therapist. I also use internal family systems and my modality, transformational healing, to lead people towards healing themselves, something I believe that we are all capable of. My modality, transformational healing, combines neuroscience and spirituality. It's very cool. If you are here to work on your mental health or to heal trauma, you can always go through the back episodes if you have something specific and see if there is a transformational healing episode on that specific thing. If you can't find it, or if you want more private attention, you're always welcome to book a session with me through my website. The links will be below here in the show notes. I have been all over social media lately, asking all of you what you want to hear, who you want to hear from, what guests, what kind of sessions, all of that good stuff. And something that I heard from several of you is that you want to know what I did personally to heal my trauma. I'm so honored to have that question. I also just want to say, I don't know if there's ever an end point to healing all of the trauma that I have. I'm not saying this for everybody. I'm saying this for me. I feel like I heal a whole lot of things and then I find another layer, or life happens and new things happen. And I think that one of the most important things about mental health in general is understanding that there will be waves. There will be waves of feeling great. There will be waves of remembering something awful from childhood that you want to heal. There will be waves where you feel like, I don't need any therapy at all. I don't need any healing at all. I feel really good. And those periods can last years. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, all of these different things come up for healing. And I think that's just part of life. I wish I could say that I had a magic bullet that would take care of everything from now until the end of your life, but I don't. Doesn't mean I'm not working on it, though. My neuroscience nerdy brain is always creating. So stay tuned. I just want to also give such gratitude to all of you for continuing to show up and continuing to listen every single week. I can see on my podcast app how many downloads per week, and it's just amazing to me. I'm so grateful for you. If you haven't done so already, send an episode to a friend or share my newsletter. You can sign up for that below as well. I'm so grateful for all of you being here. And the way that I continue to provide this podcast at no cost to you is for you to keep inviting your friends and listening in every week. So if you haven't done so already, head over to that subscribe button and subscribe. If you have a moment, write us a little review. It really helps us so much. It helps us get the guests that you ask for and keep creating. So thank you so much for this. So if you are new to this podcast, you will hear a lot of new things today. It's up to you to integrate them as you see fit, or to say, nope, I already tried that. That doesn't work for me. What's the next thing she recommends? If you have already heard bits and pieces of this story, you will hear new things today because life continues to evolve and my own healing journey continues to evolve. I just want to start with saying, I think my trauma journey began pretty much at birth. I think there are some people who believe just because you don't remember your birth, it has no impact on you. I have found this to not be true throughout my life and throughout my practice as a therapist. I've found that people with differing birth stories sometimes will even remember little flashes once we put them under hypnosis or into a meditative state. I've found that some people don't. And either way is great. Whether you remember things, whether you don't, it's okay. I know that our bodies remember things. So even if you remember nothing from your birth, but it was a traumatic birth and you were pulled out with forceps, perhaps you're a person who gets headaches really often. Perhaps if we started healing that birth story, you wouldn't get those headaches. Who knows, right? It's all up to you and what you feel led to work on. So I would say that was where my trauma began. I think I do carry trauma from previous lifetimes. I do feel pretty solid in all of the healing that I've done on that, and I will get to that in a moment. But I do think that a traumatic birth can be the beginning for some people. I also think that I grew up in a family that had problems. I think most families have problems. It's pretty rare that I meet someone who's, yep, I had a perfect upbringing. My parents were amazing, total love, total respect for each other. Never did they fight in front of me. I have healthy attachment, and all of my relationships have been a total success. I think I can count on one hand the times that I've heard that. And once I've gotten to know that person better, I have found things that potentially they might like to work on. But everybody's different. If that is not your journey in this lifetime, God bless. Have a great time. I know that is my journey in this lifetime, is to heal various things. And each time I heal something major, I feel so much better. My body feels better. My brain feels better. I have a higher quality of life in general. So that's what I do. But to each their own. Regarding past life healing. So when I started working in past life regression, I was trained in a couple of different modalities. And if you are a therapist and you're listening right now and you're considering getting trained in something, I highly recommend that you do it. I've found that it has super helped my practice and my own healing. So what I like to use is the Akashic Records. I was also trained in something called past life regression, run by a woman named Deanna Kurtz. I Googled her recently and I could not find her. So for whatever that's worth, you may not need to spend money there. Learning how to read the Akashic Records, I found to be a really intuitive process. I first read the book, and I'm not going to remember the name of the author of the book, but it's the Akashic Records book that most people read. It's like the easiest to access. You can order it on Amazon very quickly and easily. And I started with that book. However, I read through and I found that some of the things that she was recommending didn't work so well for me. At that point, I just started creating my own intuitive process. I understand if you've not been raised with a Native American grandmother, there may not be an intuitive process for you. If that is the case, you can always apply to my multidimensional mentorship program. That program is incredible. You receive so many resources. I work with you one-on-one twice a month for you to develop yourself as a healer or guide of some kind, or astrologer or human design reader or whatever it is. Some Fortune 500 folks come through that program just to be able to develop their own intuition and their own spiritual gifts. I highly recommend it. I teach everyone who comes to that program how to read the Akashic Records if they don't already know how, and how to help somebody do past life regression on themselves too, which is really so much fun. So I will say that in terms of past life healing, I did most of it myself. I am really intuitive with the Akashic Records. I've seen flashes of my past lives throughout my entire life. I had a grandmother that taught me a lot of cool stuff, and I was able to do a lot of that healing myself, thankfully, because I know that Akashic Records readings can be super expensive. You can always do one with me, of course, but I think that learning how to do it for yourself is so useful, because you can always do a session with someone, but eventually it will lead to more and more sessions. You uncover one thing about your past lives that needs to be healed, you heal it with that person, then you're feeling another past life and another one. And I super believe that some of our healing can be done alone. Not all by any stretch of the imagination, but some of it can be done ourselves. And I love that idea of learn how to do it myself and then do it on myself whenever I want, whenever it suits my schedule. And so, yeah, that would be the first thing. Past life healing. I love the DIY approach. If you want to pay for endless readings, that is your prerogative. If you want to learn how to do it yourself, you can always apply for my multidimensional mentorship program, and I will teach you myself. The second thing that I've done a whole lot of on my healing journey is learning what different modalities can bring you. So I'm going to skip ahead many years just because that's the trajectory of how I became traumatized and how the trauma started affecting my body, which I still deal with multiple disabilities every day. It's a part of my life now. But I do notice that the more I mentally heal, the better I feel. And I believe deeply in the body, mind, spirit connection. So I'm skipping ahead several years. Then I worked overseas for a number of years. I was exposed to a lot of different things. I came home with a lot of chemicals in my body. I came home with mold exposure. I came home with incredible vicarious trauma from hearing the traumas of other folks and counseling folks with really intense trauma. And I came home with a whole load of trauma of my very own. And so when I got back to the States, I tried talk therapy for a while. I had done talk therapy a little bit when my parents got divorced and a little bit after my first big love relationship and didn't really find it helpful at all. But I went back to talk therapy when I first got back from working overseas because that was all I knew about. I really did not have such an expanded viewpoint of how to deal with trauma. I tried going on an anti-anxiety medication, which worked temporarily. I would say maybe I got a year of lessened anxiety out of being on an anti-anxiety medication for 2 months, but ultimately I didn't learn any new skills. So ultimately the anxiety came back and what was I going to do now? So I was still working for a certain organization. I ended up getting trained in EMDR. And while I was getting trained, I was just like, oh my God, I have to try this on myself. And so I did try it on myself. For those of you who are not aware, EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. And basically, it's this genius way of healing trauma that was created by this woman, Francine Shapiro. She worked with a lot of Vietnam veterans. And what she found was that talk therapy wasn't working. No shit. And she decided to work with neuroscience basically to come up with another way of healing. EMDR has loads of academic studies that support how great it is at recovering from trauma. Basically, what it does is you take a traumatic memory. You don't even have to really tell the whole thing, which is good because the more we talk about our trauma, the more it deeply it creates neural grooves in our brain. Not actual grooves, but it's the best way I can describe it. So it's wonderful to be in a sort of trauma healing session or moment where you don't have to keep talking about the trauma. So you tell the story once, or maybe you don't tell it at all. You just talk about the way you feel. Your therapist will then have you create a more negative belief about that trauma and then a more positive belief about that trauma. Some people call them different things. It doesn't really matter. One is less helpful, one is more helpful. Once you create those beliefs, you start working through the feelings that you feel when you think about that negative belief, like shame, sadness, pain, whatever it is, while your therapist is moving their hand back and forth in front of your face. Or you can be holding buzzers that first buzz in your left hand, then buzz in your right, back and forth. Or there are auditory tones that you can listen to. You can put headphones on and first hear things in your right ear, hear things in your left ear. What we have the most research and data about at the moment is the method of your therapist moving their hand back and forth in front of your face. I know it sounds crazy, but it really works. Something about your eyes moving back and forth while you process these emotions allows those emotions to have less of a hold on you. And what most people say after they're done doing EMDR about one specific trauma is, I think about that trauma now and I remember that it happened, but it really has no charge. It really has no power over me. So that is incredible. So I was doing EMDR on myself for a while. I have to say that wasn't super effective. I put in a good year or so trying to be cheap about it and just do it myself. And yeah, that was not super helpful. So I ended up seeking out an EMDR practitioner. She was fantastic. We worked on a lot of different things together. And I would say that has helped me so much. Then I decided to go back into certain kinds of therapy. I am a person who suffers from OCD, and it gets so bad when my Lyme disease flares up. Like, it's unreal, the link between OCD and Lyme disease. So if you have really bad OCD and you have not done any work on your Lyme disease yet, get that checked out. My favorite guy for Lyme disease is Dr. Richard Bloom. He is in Nyack, New York. You can Google him. Please don't reach out to me for his information because he is so easily Googleable, but he's an incredible herbalist and I really recommend him. So I know for myself, when my OCD gets really bad, I'm probably having a Lyme disease flare, or I have a new case of Lyme disease, or whatever the thing is. Most likely it's a Lyme disease flare from the Lyme disease that I already have. And so I usually reach out to him and do one of his protocols first. And then I go through something called ERP. ERP is an incredible system of therapy for OCD. It's hellish. And I'm not going to say that you don't need some EMDR to deal with the trauma after you've done the ERP treatment, but I have found ERP to be the most useful thing for me. It's exposure response prevention therapy. So let's say there are many different subtypes of OCD, and I'm not going to get too far into the weeds, but let's say, like me, you have contamination OCD, which basically means that you're afraid of getting something on you. So this is different for everybody. Some people it's about germs, some people it's about random things. Mine are very bizarre and don't make any sense at all, which is how we know it's OCD. And so exposure response prevention therapy basically takes you through the motions of being exposed to this stuff that freaks you out. It's very scary. It is not for the faint of heart, but it works. I work with people who have OCD all the time because I've been through it myself. I totally get it. And I find that there are so many different types of OCD that even though we've got these like 5 subtypes, there's way more types than that, or maybe there's subtypes of that. But one of the most common ones I found is actually more of a mental OCD. So you have the obsessive part of it, which is I can't stop thinking about this one thing. And then the compulsion to deal with that obsessive thing is to just keep thinking about it. And so it's this is tumultuous and really challenging loop of thinking about the same thing over and over again, even though you're meant to be working or you're meant to be socializing with your family or your friends. You're still thinking about that thing. And so I work with people on that a lot. And I work with people who have contamination OCD a lot because I've been really honest about my journey with that. And people know that I get it. But I would say ERP, again, exposure response prevention, has been a major part of my healing journey. I just think it's awesome. The last thing that I want to talk about today that I feel like has been so good for healing is internal family systems. I work on myself a lot using my modality, transformational healing. Transformational healing works like internal family systems. So the similarities are that we're working with your subconscious. Your subconscious is really important. And there have been lots of psychologists and therapists over the years that have talked about the subconscious. I think people are still learning how important that is, but we really do make most of our decisions from a subconscious place. And so it's really important that we treat the subconscious like it's the most important thing in the world. I do to my own anyway, and that has been really helpful for me. When you start working with the subconscious, a bunch of crap comes out. It's just part of life. Like you find one thing, it's like pulling a thread, and then you find a bunch of other things. But what I will tell you is this. Once you start working with the subconscious, you pull that thread, a bunch of crap comes out. Once you weed through all of that crap and heal it, you're pretty good. You're pretty good for a long time. It's still life. Other things will happen to you. And there will be certain opportunities for healing of older things that maybe you want to drill down a little bit deeper about. But working with the subconscious is so key because that is how you get to that place where you feel like you don't need to be in therapy or talk to any sort of healer for a number of years at a time. So I highly recommend working with the subconscious. The way I do it with transformational healing is through neuroscience also. And it's a really targeted and systematic and specific approach. There's no one else doing that work right now. I am in the process of training people to do it and giving talks at universities and things like that. But if you want a session in transformational healing, you have to book with me, which is why I bring up the idea of internal family systems, because it has some similar benefits. I find it to not be as fast. I will say this. I find transformational healing to be the fastest way to heal and process trauma. I find it to be the most long lasting too. Like my clients who come and work with me in transformational healing for a couple of months, I tend to not see them again for years afterwards. So I know that it's fast and I know that it's really deeply impacting and deeply effective. But I also know that internal family systems works with the subconscious, and that's where we want to get. That is amazing, amazing work. And so I have been trained in internal family systems, and I recently reached out to another therapist that does internal family systems just to really have more experience of it with my own healing journey, with my own internal world and my own internal brain. And I find it to be just delightful. It's really emotional. What you're doing basically is talking to different parts of yourself. For example, let's say you got into a fight with a loved one a few days ago and you were really triggered by something that they said because it made you feel like you weren't a priority. Just for example. And then you end up having that conversation inside yourself, but with different parts of yourself. So one part of you called attention, for example, is like, oh, I feel like they didn't pay enough attention to me in that scenario. And now I feel like they don't care about me as much as I care about them. And then another protector part, let's say, will come into the conversation and say, yep, they didn't pay enough attention to you. That's why they're not the right person for us to hang out with right now. Let's go find another person for us to hang out with right now, because that's not enough. And we need more. And maybe they're not on the right page for us at this point in time. So that protector part comes in. As your internal family systems therapist, I want to talk to that protector part, because it's not that you don't really like that person. And we both know that. It's that you're worried about being hurt. And so then you and I together talk to that protector part, see if we can negotiate with it, see what else it's protecting you from. And really major breakthroughs have come with my clients using internal family systems. And I'm finding it to be so helpful for myself as well. If you have the capacity to book a session with me on my website in transformational healing or IFS, internal family systems, or EMDR, I highly recommend that you do. If you don't have the capacity for that right now, but you can find someone who is in network with your insurance that can do any of those modalities, highly recommend it. I have no attitude about medications. I think medications are really helpful at certain times of our life. I think for certain people, they're really helpful for your entire life. If that's something that you want to explore, I'm happy to talk to you about that as well. And I just want to say again, thank you so much for being interested in this journey. Thank you so much for being here and showing up for yourself every single week to do healing work when you can. And I am so proud for each and every one of you. Thank you again for being a part of this community. Talk to you soon.
Thank you so much for listening to these important conversations about cosmic leadership and the changing needs of our times. If you enjoyed this conversation, please rate and review this podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also share it with a friend. Join our crew at Adelina East on Instagram or at Adelina East Healing on Facebook. With all the love from every dimension, Adelina.